Welcome to today's news briefing presented by CalOES and Listos California, co-hosted by Ethnic Media Services and California Black Media, working in partnership with Mosaic Media and Communications. I'm Sandy Close, EMS Director. The 4th of July is commonly associated with fireworks, barbecues, time with friends and family, and for most of us, it's viewed as the official start of summer. But we cannot lose sight of a critical point. Our summers are growing increasingly hotter and drier, thanks to climate change. Furthermore, California residents will likely face interrelated challenges, from wildfires to wildfire smoke, to power outages, to dangerous water conditions, and more. These challenges pose an especially high risk for California's most vulnerable and underserved populations. Given what's at stake, the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, CalOES, and Listos California have prepared the Summer Safety Package to help communities this summer. Today's briefing, with the generous help of Listos and CalOES, is an opportunity for us to let our audiences learn more about preparing for extreme heat during the summer months, to understand the full range of options and resources available to them, and to be as proactive as possible in the face of hazardous conditions. We ask our speakers to speak slowly, as I'm doing, so our interpreters in American Sign Language, Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean can keep up with our speakers. And we ask reporters to enter questions in the chat box. Speakers, we encourage you to monitor these questions on the chat so you can answer the ones relevant to you. We will, as time allows, open up the conference for Q&A at the conclusion of our speakers. We'll be sending a video of today's briefing with expanded bios and contact information for each speaker to all participants on today's call. Now I turn the conference over to my colleague and our moderator, Regina Brown Wilson, Executive Director of California Black Media, who will introduce our speakers. Regina, go for it.
Thanks so much, Sandy, and good morning, everyone. On today's call, you'll hear from experts working on the front lines. Our first speaker is Brayden Murdock. He's a meteorologist with the National Weather Services and a liaison to CalOES. Brayden will provide insight into the kinds of weather patterns California can experience as we head into deeper, or when we head deeper into summer. Our next speaker you'll hear from then will be Deanna Crofts-Pelayo, Assistant Director of Crisis Communications and Public Affairs with CalOES. Deanna will take us through the state's coordinated response efforts. Next, you'll hear from Alf LaMont, the CEO of LaMont Digital and Listos California Digital Specialists. Alf and his team have a long track record of working with Listos California to produce several of their online and digital products for previous campaigns and this one as well. Following Alf, you will hear from leaders from community-based organizations with Listos California to raise awareness about the summer safety packages across a wide spectrum of communities. And those leaders include Jacqueline Nushi, the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator with Project Camp, George Hernandez Mejia, the Director of Emergency Operations for the Community Organized Relief Effort, CORE, and Peter Thao, a Program Specialist for Fresno Asian Business Institute and Resource Center. I won't expect you guys to have a quiz on that. We will tell you who's coming up each time. But before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone on today's call that we do have American Sign Language interpreter providing simultaneous interpretation. And also one more note, please be aware that the speakers will take questions at the conclusion of all after all the presentations. And reporters, though, can add their questions into the chat throughout the call. So Brayden, we'll go ahead and kick it off with you. Is Brayden unmuted?
There he goes. I was just asking to be unmuted.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for participating today. So yeah, this weekend is actually one of the first weekends a lot of California is going to feel those typical summer conditions where we're really going to get hot. A lot of those areas in the Central Valley, as well as going towards Southern California, are looking at that triple-digit heat. And this is the first widespread event we've had so far this season. Now, California is interesting in the fact that we actually don't see a lot of our record, all-time record temperatures until we head towards kind of late in the season. So think of August, even September, where we start to see some of our warmest of the warm. But yeah, in between, we can still.
Brayden, could I ask you to talk a little more slowly for
Yes,
our interpreters? They're trying to keep up, and thank you.
Okay, sorry. I'm former media, so I'm used to talking fast. So yeah, I'll slow it down. So as we go through the season, we can see these individual events where we have plenty of heat, like what we're going to be seeing for the holiday weekend. But usually our strongest heat impacts wind up being more towards late August going into September, because we're lucky enough that we have a good portion of our season being stratus focused. So think of low clouds over some of our biggest populated areas, very cloudy days over summer. So you think of when they call June gloom, no sky July, and even Fogust for a good portion of August. What that means for us is we don't really see too many heat impacts during summer proper, but this event that we're having coming through right now is a high pressure building for the area. And what that means for us is clearing skies, not a whole lot of wind. High pressures typically inhibit wind, and that still means plenty of sunshine. In this case, when that wind stops blowing, we don't get that sea breeze that helps us cool down. So this is why we're a little bit worried about this weekend. We're really going to see things slow down and warm up. So this could be a bit more prolonged. Not only are we going to be seeing hot conditions during the day, but we're going to be seeing pretty warm nights. So think of just not having the opportunity to cool down between these very warm days. Now, as we head further into next week, we kind of go back more towards our typical pattern, but it is something to bear in mind that there's more than just the heat we need to be worried about, because we had quite the winter, plenty of snowpack in the Sierra. And with all this heat that's coming through, we'll actually see increased melt there. So we're actually going to be seeing some of our rivers flow. So not only are we dealing with heat, we might deal with some localized flooding because of that. And of course, a lot of folks are going to be out and about for the holiday weekend. They might be trying to escape some of that heat. They might go to the beaches. Crowded beaches mean problems as well. And of course, we always have those risks for rip currents, as well as shock from how cold the water still is. So folks need to constantly be prepared, especially when they're dealing with the heat as well. Now, as we head into the later summer months, again, I said our higher heat impacts wind up becoming possible as we get towards the end of the season. And you can see the seasonal temperature outlook is just a bit above for us here in California for the most part. It's not the highest of the high. That's going to be more towards Arizona, but still a very warm summer ahead of us. And then things will be kind of slow to calm down, because again, going into the fall, we hold on to that heat. So think of it more of as a marathon than it is an individual sprint preparing for heat. Now, along with it, we're also seeing precipitation staying pretty close to average, which for a good portion of California doesn't mean a whole lot. We're going to probably stay pretty sparse when it comes to precipitation through summer, but still some things to be prepared with, especially if we do get any bit of drizzle out there after a long time of just not having anything on those roads can become slick if they get wet, especially with all the oils and dust that haven't been moving around throughout the season. So with our summer outlook, it is going to be for the most part just a little bit above average for a good portion of California. But as we head into fall, you guys might have heard we're looking at El Nino conditions. That means more for Southern California as of right now than any other area, because El Nino for Central Coast and North can kind of mean in between things. A moderate one might mean weaker rain chances for the Bay Area and Central Coast, but then a more extreme El Nino could actually mean less rain for that area. So it's a bit of a tricky setup for that area, but at least for Southern California, it does mean more rain chances. So after summer, our outlook does look a little bit wetter for winter for Southern California, and a bit more we'll see as it comes for our friends in the Bay Area. And of course, with this long going summer, we always want you guys to be safe. Make sure you check in with us constantly. We have product updates wherever we have these heat events. And of course, with the 4th of July weekend, we know a lot of folks are going to be out and about trying to enjoy this warm weather before it gets too warm across the region.
Sorry, I was muted. You'd think we would have that down pat by now. Sorry. Thank you so much, Mr. Murdock. Deanna, are you unmuted and ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And let me just also say thank you to our National Weather Service partners. You know, they have been with us day in, day out at our state operations center during the craziest emergencies. So we got some good intel there, and we appreciate you, Brayden, in the future if we ask you again to come on. But as he mentioned, you know, we're really noticing that California's climate, especially its summers, are becoming hotter and drier. Right now, I'm actually in Grass Valley with the governor's office, with CalOES and CAL FIRE, basically telling people and showing people all of the innovative ways that we are getting ready ahead of this wildfire season. And so it's important for us to all know that all of these elements are interrelated. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but ultimately extreme heat, wildfire, you know, energy issues, water safety are all interrelated risks together. Like Brayden said, we are going to be seeing, you know, triple digit days in these coming days, especially for 4th of July weekend. And our families are going to want to cool down in the water. But it is very dangerous right now. We have already seen too many people that have lost their lives during this period of time. And so do what you can to stay indoors, to stay cool. And that's basically going to be my message on top of all the cool materials that we're going to be talking about today. I also want you all to know that, you know, the state's doing everything we can to prepare now to ensure that we're ready together for, you know, these next few months. So we are actively coordinating with our local, state, and federal partners, working with local governments and community organizations to ensure that they have the resources they need to stay safe. On top of that too, CalOES does a huge push to also train swiftwater rescue teams. And so, you know, if you do head out on the water, many local teams will be out there and trained to do rescues. We don't want them to do those rescues though. It's very dangerous for them and for you to be on the water, but they're there just in case. Also, we have the California Fire and Rescue Mutual Aid System, where we, as a state, lend fire engines to local government personnel, local fire departments, so that they can use those engines during the year. But then if there is a big fire that happens that the state needs an all hands on deck approach, they are going to take that engine and the staff, and they were going to help us fight the fire. So it's a huge part of kind of the resources that we already have too, through our state firefighters as well. And then at the end of the day, also just moving resources to areas that are at need. So if we are seeing that the climate is, you know, that of wildfire weather, or if we are seeing that there's an uptick in, dangerous water activity, we will actually ask local governments to move resources into areas ahead of time so that if there's a wildfire, if there is a rescue needed, they can go in and help out our local governments as well. Let's go to the next slide. And then just finally, I mentioned earlier, we have a suite of resources and materials for you all to be ready in the coming months. And so this isn't just, wildfires. It's not just extreme heat, but it's everything all interrelated together. So we want you all to have a summer of safety. So specifically, you will see resources on, dangerous water, extreme heat, wildfire smoke, and power outages. And so what are the tangible tips that your families and communities can take ahead of time so that they're ready if something happens and they know what to do if it does happen? And at the end of the day, we always go back to our 5 tips to ensure that folks have what they need before a disaster. So number 1, get alerts, sign up for your local county alert system. Go to calalerts.org. I will also put it in the chat. Number 2, make a plan. Have that conversation with your family to ensure that, your little ones, your older ones all know what they would do during an emergency. What would be the evacuation route that they would take? Where would we meet up afterwards if we were separated? Number 2 and 3, basically put together all of your important items in case you need to leave your house very quickly or in case you need to stay for an extended period of time. So that means important documents, medication, food, water, and it doesn't have to be, cost prohibitive, just think about it ahead of time and put everything together that would be necessary for you in a few days if you had to leave your home. And then finally, help others. This is a community movement. Listos California is really part of this engagement of trusted messengers and local partners to ensure that we are also spreading the word amongst each other, because oftentimes people will not trust us as much as they will trust you all that are specifically on the ground or media as well. So I think I'm getting a few questions in the chat, but I'm going to let Regina facilitate those afterwards, but basically here if you all need anything, and if you do have any interview requests, happy to take them. Go to media@caloes.ca.gov. That's it. Thanks, Regina.
Thank you so much, Ms. Crofts-Pelayo. Next, we'll have, and just don't worry, guys, we will get to those questions at the end. We'll just get through everybody who's given us the information first. But now we'll hear from LaMont. Mr. LaMont?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is LaMont. I'm the lead at LaMont Digital. I know I've seen a few familiar faces in the comments and folks who are here, so it's great to be in front of you all here. As part of the full Summer of Safety campaign, we've developed a set of materials to prepare Californians to keep safe from the identified 5 seasonal threats. That's wildfires. Sorry, I'm going to slow down. Wildfires, wildfire smoke, extreme heat, power outages, and cold and fast water. And we have items to print out, hand out at community events. We can post them online, as well as activities and games for kids and families. These materials are currently available in English and in Spanish, but additional languages will be available in the coming weeks as those translations come through. Now, I'm going to walk you through some of these materials and how we expect folks to use them. And we'll start with these two that you see directly in front of you. So this is our Summer of Safety flyer. It's a 2-sided sheet. It has an overview of the 5 types of threats that summer weather can bring to California. The front side has a QR code that directs directly to the Listos California Summer of Safety resources page. And if any of you are bold enough to hold a phone up to your screen, you can go directly to that right now. This sheet can be handed out as a flyer. You can hang it up on a window, on community bulletin boards and storefronts as a poster. And then the back side has 3 helpful tips on what to do in each of the 5 possible emergencies. If we can go to the next slide. We also have a myriad of summer safety tips. So 5 different one-sided flyers on each of the 5 summer disaster topics. And that also includes fast and cold water. As we mentioned, that snow melt is still an issue, which makes for a really wild situation in people's heads, that you can have fast and cold water while you're experiencing these extreme heats, fire, smoke, all of these different issues. And all of these could happen at any moment jointly. So it's important for us to make all of them accessible at the same time. In addition to that, we have what are the quick guides, and you can see those on the far right. Those are basically how to be ready before, during, and after a specific emergency. This is important because we can prepare people, but really response and what to do afterwards is really important, and make sure that folks are aware of the resources and the actions that they can take to be safer, not just during the heat of the emergency, but also immediately following it. We have more potentially life-saving tips and guidance to offer for some of these scenarios. So it's important for us to kind of look through all of these. These are all packaged into the Listos California quick guides. And those will be also packaged in brochures that will have front and back that will be available for tabling and events. And then if we go to slide 3, you can see some of the activities for families. So the grantee partners have requested games and activities that can engage family members, so adults and kids can talk about being prepared and what to expect. And so we put together 2 different family-oriented resources to create conversations around preparing for wildfire, wildfire smoke, extreme heat, and power outages. We have a 2-in-1 print handout that includes a puzzle for learning about extreme heat, wildfire, and power outages, as well as instructions on how to use the puzzle pieces to play a memory game. We have a bookmark and a coloring sheet. The bookmark contains recommendations for picture books about natural disasters. And the coloring sheet is an activity for to guide families on how to pack a go bag. And you can see there the gigantic backpack and little pieces that folks can add to it to pack a go bag. If we can go to slide, and there's one more thing on here. Sorry, if we can go back real quick. There's one more thing here on the far right is a sign for dangerous water. This summer season, as I mentioned before, many rivers are flowing faster and harder and are colder than normal, which makes them more dangerous even for strong and experienced swimmers. So we created these sheets that can be printed out horizontally or vertically to create signs that you can place near potentially dangerous bodies of water. All right, onward to our social digital communications. So we have a whole slew of newly created images and art that have come out around this with important summer of safety threats, specifically wildfire, wildfire smoke, extreme heat, fast water, and power outages. I want to speak a little bit to some of the design elements on these because one of the important things that we are considering is not just cultural competency, but what our communities have experienced in the past. And so we are purposely avoiding images of actual fire and actual smoke because so many of our communities have actually experienced these, and we want the message to be important and not necessarily trigger trauma responses on these visuals. As you can see, all of these are specifically speaking around some of the most vulnerable groups, folks who are older, folks who work outside, and really speaking to these important life-saving issues that come up during emergencies. If we can go to the next slide. What we refer to as the new kid on the block right now with our emergency preparedness has been extreme heat. And as we know, extreme heat is going to happen this weekend, and it's already happening across the state. And so what we decided was we started our messaging around some of the most vulnerable folks out there, and those are folks who will be working outdoors. These images are created with heat maps in mind, but also to create a sense of folks being heroes and of folks being in control of their own situations. And so what we have here are our communities basically standing up against the sun, taking care of themselves and of each other. And then on the far right, you can see one of the art commissions. This is a preview of one of the art commissions. We've commissioned a few California-based artists to create art around extreme heat and some of the other important messages. All of these images will be available. If we can go to the next slide. But also we have a variety of animations and video, and all of these will be available again in multiple languages, English and Spanish first, and then moving on. And again, it's just a way of making sure that we have resources available for community members to tell each other about the important work and important life-saving tips that are essential this summer. Let's see. Sorry, if we can go to the next slide. You can find all of these digital tools in English and Spanish on our toolkit with more messaging, more videos, more art, and more languages still to come. So what we have here is just the tip of the iceberg as we continue the summer of multiple threats to Californians. So if we can go to the next slide. You can access all of these new resources on the website and at the Summer of Safety page. You can go to the Summer of Safety page on the Listos California website, which is listoscalifornia.org/summer, or you can go to the main website, listoscalifornia.org, and scroll down where it says, "Make this a Summer of Safety," and then click to learn more. And then to get to the materials we've talked about today, you can scroll down to get resources, which will take you to a page where you can filter all of the new materials we've put together by language, topic, and formats. Or you can just click through the links that I'm about to drop in the chat, which I think might be a little bit easier for everybody. We're eager for folks to be using these resources. We're very proud of the work that's gone into these. The visuals are, we think, are very inspirational and speak to our most vulnerable, but not in a way that that we feel disengages folks. So we are looking forward to any questions, and frankly, for you all to use some of these resources in whatever capacity you see best fit. Thank you.
Mr. LaMont, thank you so much. That was so helpful. Now we're going to turn to our CBOs, who are incredibly important in doing the work on the ground. We have Jacqueline Nushi, George Hernandez Mejia, and Peter Thao, who are going to kind of talk about the work that they're doing. And so, can you, each one of you, just introduce yourselves and the populations that you serve?
I guess I'll go first. My name is Jacqueline Nushi. I work for Project Camp. We basically serve families and children with pop-up camps during disasters. Think a summer camp for kids in disasters is kind of the way I like to put it. We just add a little bit of trauma-informed mindfulness activities along with the crafts and the foods and the games.
Great. George?
Yeah, hi, my name is George Hernandez Mejia. I work for Core Response. We are a humanitarian crisis nonprofit that responds to crises globally. We have operations in Ukraine, in Turkey after the earthquake, and then multiple operations within the US responding to natural disasters in California. And we focus on wildfire mitigation and risk reduction, and the populations that we serve tend to be low income, marginalized communities that are most at risk for climate change and the effects that we're facing due to it. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks. Not just it, that's a lot of stuff that you're doing. And Peter.
Hi there, my name is Peter Thao, a program director at ABIRG, or the Asian Business Institute and Resource Center. We provide assistance to small business owners and farmers in the Central Valley area, and we do that by hosting educational workshops, finding grants or loan opportunities, We connect those businesses to resources and a lot more. And with the funding from the Listos California grant, our organization was able to provide a lot of disaster relief training and prep for those farmers and small producers as well as business owners. And through our time working with the grant, we've done a lot of assessments. And during one assessment conducted in 2022, 100% of our farmers have encountered natural disasters like drought, frost, flooding, hail, you name it. And was it, during the time of those workshops, a lot of them showed a lot of, we've seen a lot of things where majority of them didn't have a plan. And that's why, that's why we're here for the Listos California, and that's why we're here to provide them, that disaster preparedness and resources for the population that we work with.
And so, George, what's the recent experience that, your organization has had with helping with disaster response and some of the lessons that you have learned that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll talk about around August of last year in California. We responded to wildfires up in Siskiyou County. They were the Yeti and the McKinney fire. We previously had a wildfire mitigation program happening up there, so we had staff and resources in those areas. And when the fires started happening, we wanted to mobilize our resources to see what we could do to support. We went in with the intention to provide home hardening or defensible space support for homes that were under evacuation zones. So in order to give them a better chance of survivability, but we found that when we actually started talking to the community members and listening to their concerns and needs, their fear wasn't so much the construction and the space around their home. It was more based off information. There was a lot of confusion on who was in what evacuation zone. There was a lot of confusion on where they are in maps in relation to the wildfire. So what we ended up doing after finding out that that was a need is setting up shop at a local hub, a post office in Happy Camp, where community members were able to walk up and talk to us as we helped them look at whether or not they were in the evacuation zones, if they were in the evacuation warning zones, and just helping them with translating a lot of the information that's on the maps that the incident management team in charge of that fire were giving out. It's often very overwhelming and confusing for community members to see all this stuff coming out. And we, all of us in emergency management, tend to forget that we speak a lot in acronyms. We are used to the resources that are handed to us. So we really want to act as that liaison within us and the community, so we're able to translate it to them, so they're able to make the informed decisions that they need to make in response to the fire. So we found that once we started talking to them, explaining where their evacuation zones are, where they were located, there was a sense of relief. There was a sense of understanding of what they had to do next in order to be prepared. And even signing them up for emergency alerts in the future is information that remains with the community long after the fires disappeared. So, we went in there with, this is kind of what we're thinking we're going to do, but it's really, after listening to the community, we were able to pivot and meet the needs that we actually, they've identified within themselves that they were concerned about. So that was a good recent one in California that we were able to support in, and quite honestly, anyone could.
Great. Jacqueline, let's bring you into this conversation as well. Is there anything that surprised you in the ways in which you target audience are responding to your outreach?
Well, children are amazing human beings. And not that actually surprises me so much. I've got many years in emergency management. But they are the best when it comes to learning preparedness and taking it home to their families. So, what we found is that, we spend the time preparing the children and the families, or preparing the children, and then suddenly, as a mom and dad, you're making go bags out of your ears. But children are very resilient, and it's amazing to see them actually make it through what they have to make through just in daily, everyday life. So what we found is that, you know, they still need some time. They still need to process just like all of us do. And we need to make sure that we're doing that for them. So learning that, using that, giving them the tools that, you know, they need and the families need is a great way to build the mindfulness of preparedness. So yeah, it's not really didn't surprise me, but for a lot of people, they don't put it together, especially emergency managers. And I can say that because I am one. And you know, we get all wrapped up in what's happening. We're in the EOC, we're trying to, you know, organize everything. And yes, we've sort of thought of the families. We've got Red Cross there, we've got the shelter, we're feeding them, right? But there's so much more that they need. You know, the families need that break to be able to cry, go back to work, figure out what they're going to do next. And Project Camp provides all of that for them. Plus, we provide a safe environment for kids to be kids and have the ability to talk out what's happening. So.
Great. Thank you so much. And George, you know, how do you imagine the resources that are being shared today will be used by the community?
Yeah, so we've been Listos partners for almost probably a little over a year now, and all the resources that have been coming out have been so incredibly helpful for our community members in understanding the impacts that may come from an emergency and what they could do to prevent it. Jacqueline alluded to this earlier, but we're a big advocate of like, you know, getting to the kids of the family. Right. We do a lot of our disaster preparedness program and education within LA County. And we found that a lot of the kids that are in these schools have to take this information and kind of translate it up to their family members. You know, they might be first generation, the primary English speakers in their family. So if we're able to engage them with the materials that Listos provides us, that are, you know, especially the pamphlets itself, the ones that talk about wildfire smoke, heat awareness, all that stuff, that they're able to pass that information upwards and talk to their families about it. So that's one way that the resources help a lot. And it's good, clear, concise instructions of what you can do to prevent an emergency before it happens, you know, just trying to plan around, you know, if there's extreme heat days, what will you do in case there are rolling blackouts? What medication or what special circumstances might your family be facing that you would want to prepare for before it actually happens? So yeah, these resources are great for just being able to start those conversations, give people something so they could take home and something they could follow in event of emergency. So that's why it's been incredibly valuable for us.
Great. And, you know, Peter, same question, I think probably for you, but for the business community. You know, how do you see, you know, the information being shared and what do reporters need to take back to community, those small business mom and pops that may not, you know, they're burning the candle at both ends. What do you say?
You know, usually, you know, for those folks, in the areas that we work with for those folks, I always have the saying of, you know, it's not if, but when the natural disaster will happen, and always be prepared. Always be prepared. Was it always take pictures of when the events happen? Always, you know, and if you're insured, you know, and let your insurance agent know. You know, if you have a feeling that you know, a little short story. We had a farmer who had a feeling that was it the strong winds with all the dust, something's going to blow over his crops. And he let his insurance agent know. He's like, hey, you know, I'll put an imaginary, hey, Phil, was it tonight, something's going to happen tonight or tomorrow morning, just heads up, so just so you have time to come to my farm and check it out for me. And so, you know, and sure enough, was it the next morning, he had rows toppled over, you know, trellises down, and he had to throw all that crop away. But with that, you know, being prepared and knowing, was it knowing that the resources are there, and informing third party organizations and their insurance, they are able to pull through and able to make a recovery with that. So that's kind of what we do, and we kind of give them tidbits like that for that. But that's pretty much how the responses is, and that's how we figure out for those folks.
Great. Well,
If
before
I
we,
could- I'm
oh.
sorry, can I just add a little bit too about the materials?
Oh,
I do want to share that, from my perspective in emergency management, there's so much information out there right now about what to do, where to go, how to do it. What I want to say about the Listos materials is that it's very easy to read, and they are very, very to the point and cover the information. It's not reading something and you're trying to question what does this mean or whatever. Very simple language, very easy to read. And if I could share just one little example of what I mean by that, during the Slater fire in Happy Camp, which was about a few years ago, before the fire, I had done some trainings for Listos, and I passed out the disaster guides. And, we trained, we talked about it, and then I left. And sure enough, Happy Camp experienced a very large fire. After that fire, I was at a local assistance center where I still had my disaster guides there, because in my mind, yes, people are going through trauma, but they're still eager to know, what could I have done differently? As I'm sitting at my table, this lady walks up, she gasps at my disaster guide, which made me a little uncomfortable. Wasn't sure what was going to happen. And she grabbed it and ran around the room telling everyone, this information saved us. We were able to use everything that was said there, everything Jackie trained us on. So, and at that point I had other people coming up and saying, she's absolutely right. We are so amazed with this information. We're so grateful that you shared it with us. So I think that's the important takeaway as well, that this material is super easy. It's not hard to read. It's not hard to understand.
Thank you so much. And before we transition, I'm going to let each one of you just give, just your brief takeaway of what you want, maybe just one important thing that you want to make sure that the reporters know on this call, that they should highlight, and making sure that everybody, also knows that they should be looking at Summer of Safety at listoscalifornia.org. So we'll make sure that is in the chat, but I wanted to make sure I said that. But, 30 seconds if each one of you want to give us your final thoughts on something you want to make sure you leave with the media today, before we start our Q&A.
Okay.
And Jacqueline, we can start with you.
Okay. Simply educate yourself. Make sure you're aware of the alerts, and make sure that someone outside of your family community, out of the county, out of the state, has those same alerts, so that they too are aware of what's going on. Meet and greet your neighbors, because I guarantee you, when you're evacuating and you look over and they're struggling, you're going to have to stop leaving to help them. Take the time to go for a Sunday drive and look at your evacuation routes. Build your go bag for your car at that time, and make your plan while you're all together in that car. And always be aware of your surroundings, because disasters always seem to sneak up on us, no matter how much you think you're prepared. So disasters can be managed with preparedness.
Great. George, brief. Tell me one thing you want to leave with the media.
Yeah, no, I will say, think about your circumstances, think about your community, the people around you. Know if you might have a neighbor or someone in your apartment complex that might need to be checked in on. Maybe they're bound by a wheelchair, or maybe there's someone with accessibility issues. Just kind of think about these things before an emergency actually happens to see how you could best support in these circumstances. And definitely think about it in your family as well, whether it's like taking certain prescription medications and having some extra ones in case of an emergency, or if you use prescription glasses, or even if you have pets or maybe even livestock, just like what would you do if an emergency was about to impact your area, and how would you work around these circumstances to make sure that you and your community and your family are as safe as you can be and recover as quickly as possible.
Great. And Peter, one thing you want to give us?
Have a plan. Always have a plan. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I'm pretty sure Jackie and George pretty much hit it on the nail on the spot. Nail on the head. Always have a plan. Always spread the word, and if stay connected. That's pretty much how you'll be able to pull through.
Thank you guys so much for that. We want to open up to question and answers because I know that we're getting tons of questions, and I want to make sure we get to the reporters. And while we have experts on the line that can answer them, I'm going to just shift right on over to the questions that have been put in the chat. So know that I did not forget about you. Even if you have to put it at the top again, please feel free to do it. I'm filtering through as we're asking them. So this question is for Brayden or Deanna. Why is the East Coast so much hotter right now than California? What areas are most at risk for extreme heat? Maybe that's more Brayden.
Yeah, so we're kind of a very different setup between the East Coast and the West Coast. The East Coast gets a warm ocean current, which leads to more humidity being pushed inland, whereas our ocean current's a cold ocean current, so that means less evaporation, which means less humidity. So they get an opportunity to really build up this heat because it stays insulated, especially around the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, which is why you've been hearing Texas seeing plenty of extreme heat over days. Whereas here in California, we don't get that humidity. So even though some of our days are warm, it's gets an opportunity to really cool off at night until we head into these kind of high pressure setups that we're going to get this weekend. So for California itself, some of the areas for more extreme heat, that's going to be the Central Valley as well as more of the urban areas, just because, again, not a whole lot of humidity to slow down that warm up. But also when we finally get into those evenings, pavement as well as brickwork and concrete can actually hold heat a little bit longer. So that increases those heat risks for California. But as far as the United States is, with this point in the season, extreme heat risks are going to be a lot more focused towards the south. Hopefully that answers your full question.
Great. And the next one is from Renee. We live in Pomona, which is Los Angeles County. We have already begun having wildfires. A few broke out during the last couple of days. So California is known for very hot and dry summers with brush fires expected during triple-digit days. Are there special days and night equipment? Is there special day and night equipment to help battle wildfires, especially in the mountains where homes and animals are to prevent tragedies from happening? This is kind of a two-part question.
Yeah. Hey, Regina, I'm happy to take it. So what I'll say is that, yes, we're starting to have wildfires already. Some of them are kind of what they call those spot fires. And so they're smaller and they are staying in the grass, and, crews are able to put them out relatively quickly. And so I think the other thing to know is that because of some of the changing climate, there's also been more lightning strikes in June when I think had anticipated it in July. And so I think that also adds to kind of some of those quick fires. And so I think the good thing is that we have the latest technology as a state and our partners on the ground to be able to not only detect when wildfires happen, but then be able to send resources really quickly to put them out where they start. And so I think it's part of the comprehensive investments that Governor Newsom has made, not only in CAL FIRE, CalOES, but other agency partners at the state and local level to ensure that we are able to fully fight, fires that do appear. And so I think we'll continue to see them happen throughout the months, and we hope that they stay small and we can attack them quickly. And then really where we get into a much trickier situation is when there's a lot of wildfires throughout the state. So then that then exhausts some of the resources and spreads them out thin. And that's, I think also kind of one of the concerns we have. We're not quite there yet, but we're doing everything we can to be ready now for that.
Right. This question, is the state moving resources to ensure people who are incarcerated have access to air conditioning? Texas has no air conditioning in its prisons, according to the New York Times, with rising fatalities from heat.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I would defer to my CDCR colleagues or Department of Corrections colleagues to be able to answer that question a little better. But we do know that the state has an extreme temperature plan. And so that also means for the hottest hots and the coldest colds. And so that ultimately, that emergency plan then filters down through all of the state agencies, departments, all the way down to the local level where there are specific tactics before, during, and after an extreme temperature event that folks need to follow. And so I think CDCR definitely has that extreme temperature plan that's part of that to ensure that there is, resources for our justice involved community as well.
Thanks for that. Next question is Arceli. What are the projections for the summer? Will it be hotter than in other years? Until now, we've enjoyed good weather in LA. So what can we expect?
So the summer outlook is looking slightly warmer than average for this year. It will start to lean a little bit even warmer as we continue towards fall. Now that's going to be the overall outlook. We could have individual events that wind up being even warmer than that. Again, with our highest heat-based conditions wind up being when we have high pressures like this weekend trying to come through. So overall, summer does look like it might trend a bit on the warmer side, but some of those extremes might get even more extreme as we start to see these weather patterns start to build through. And those become more common as we head more into the later parts of the season. And along with that, fuels will dry out with these setups, but luckily they don't line up with as much with our winds. And when I say fuels, I mean things that can help wildfires build. So luckily, we don't get a whole lot of our hottest weather when we also see some of our driest and windiest weather. So that's going to be a big bonus for us. But as we head towards fall, those wind events and drying conditions become a little bit more common. So luckily it's not at the same time, but unfortunately we could see both as we continue through the summer and fall.
I'll add to on top of what Brayden said, and I know I said it in the very beginning, is that, this weekend feels like it's the first of, hot weather, and you're like, man, I want to go into the pool or go to a river or a lake. But because of all of the inclement weather that we had January, February, March, extreme, rain, flooding and whatnot, that has created an enormous amount of snow in the mountains that are now melting. And so then that ultimately is then coming down into our local waterways. And so your communities are going to feel much more, likely to want to beat the heat this weekend, enjoy the holiday with their families. But it is extremely dangerous to be on any waterways right now. It might look like, everything is fine. And but under the surface, there's a lot of debris and the water's moving extremely fast. And so definitely also want to caution us all there that we are seeing that this water safety issue is going to be something that's going to be hitting us for months to come.
And we have a question about cooling centers. How can our media find out where and how many cooling centers there will be in specific cities, counties, rural communities?
Yeah, great question, Regina. So cooling centers are always locally led. And so really ultimately our cities and counties, they identify areas and buildings that will have AC and other resources, and they will open them up. Like I had mentioned, there's this extreme, temperature response plan. And so ultimately they follow kind of that guidebook on how to open them and when to actually open them and when it's needed. And so I think that always check in with your local city or county to see if they are doing cooling centers. And then we do everything we can at the state level to try to aggregate a lot of that data in a list. So I always encourage everyone to go to news.caloes.ca.gov and for that list of cooling centers, but always start locally first.
And I have several insurance questions, so I'm going to ask one because I think that they're all kind of together. So just so everyone knows, sorry, but some insurance companies are pulling out of California, which we all have read the headlines, and leaving many people uninsured. So what can people do who have lost or are losing their insurance carriers?
That's a great question, Regina. I wish I had my Department of Insurance friends on here. I really do recommend for folks, if there are any issues that they have with their insurance companies, or especially with some of the ones that have kind of pulled out, given some of the wildfire insurance issues, to really check with the Department of Insurance. They will, and the insurance commissioner, they will be your advocate in a lot of this work, and they will also be able to provide you resources, you know, to and answer your questions as well. So I'm sorry I can't give specifics, but Department of Insurance, Insurance Commissioner are going to be your best bet for that one.
Great. And then this sorry, this question. I'm reading questions from two different sides of my screen. Sorry about that. This question though is for Alf. Mr. LaMont, where can people access the materials that you talked about today?
Sure. So you can find it at the Listos California at listoscalifornia.org. But once more, I will drop in some links on the chat here so that you can see exactly, you can click directly through them. So hopefully you can go listoscalifornia.org/summer. You'll get directly to those. If you want to actually peruse the listoscalifornia.org website, I would recommend it. I think it has a lot of context and a lot of important resources. But we also have the social press kit there for folks who want to just access the social media directly, as well as all of the important Summer of Safety work.
Okay, and I see people dropping that in the chat. I think I have time for like one more question and then one more round of 30 seconds, really 30 seconds with our speakers. This is from Sunita. Are there any explicit protections required of employers to protect employees who primarily work outside, such as farm workers?
Yes, absolutely. And I will also reiterate that Alf has some really good materials that his team has created for that social toolkit. Ultimately, our outdoor workers have rights to rest, shade, and water. And so definitely recommend folks going to our listoscalifornia.org website to learn more about their rights, and they can kind of read some of those one-pagers, especially in the extreme heat section. And on top of that too, if there is ever any smoke, you know, from wildfires or other, they are also, you know, entitled to wearing a mask, or you know, it's also for their health benefit to be wearing a mask too. So listoscalifornia.org is always great. And then there's also another really awesome website, 99calor.org. And so that's our labor agency's website that's specific to outdoor workers and kind of some of the steps they can take to stay safe, and also their rights specifically while they're working.
Well, great. Well, you know, I want to just thank all of the speakers that have come on, the CBOs that have come and shared their experience. I know that we are at the hour and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thank all of the reporters, the interpreters, the speakers, and I look forward to seeing you on the next briefing. We'll be tackling some of the state's biggest challenges. Thank you all for being here today.